This is actually the Scrum framework. This is a representation where you actually see all the roles, okay? You see all the events and you see all the artifacts. On quite a broad vision, you can actually see that the Scrum Master is always visible and is always present throughout the entire framework. The product owner is directly related to the product backlog, so the main purpose of a product owner is to actually take care of the product backlog. Okay, the idea of a development team is to be focused inside of a sprint and actually produce the product increment. Okay, and as we will see, every event is an opportunity for the entire scrum to inspect and adapt the work that is being done. So, taking a close look at the framework, it all starts with the product backlog, and at every sprint planning that happens right before the sprint actually starts, you promote items from the product backlog into the sprint backlog. Then you subdivide each product backlog item that was selected for the sprint into tasks that allow the development team, once the sprint starts, to actually start producing the work that needs to be done. The development team meets on a daily basis, updates the monitoring charts that show what is the evolution of the sprint backlog, updates the sprint backlog whenever possible, updates the monitoring charts on a daily basis, and on a daily basis, throughout the entire sprint, produces small increments that at the end of the sprint produce a major product increment that adds up to all the previous product increments that were already presented to the customer, and then a sprint review occurs. Inside of a sprint review, everyone gets to look at the product increment, everyone gets to look at the product backlog, analyzes what was already done, what wasn't done. Then a sprint retrospective occurs for the Scrum team to actually know what went well, what went not so well inside of a sprint regarding the relationships, the people, and the work conducted. And a new sprint occurs and starts with a sprint planning, a sprint backlog, and so on and so on. So this is quite an iterative process, and this is what the Scrum framework allows us to do. Let's take a few key points. Regarding Scrum, Scrum is a framework. The idea is to address complex and adaptive problems, and the main goal is to enable the creation and delivery of products of the highest value possible. There are 3 pillars that are fundamental to promote the Scrum framework: transparency, inspection, and adaptation. The idea is that all the events, all the artifacts inside of the Scrum framework promote these 3 pillars: transparency, inspection, and adaptation. Inside of the Scrum team, there are 3 distinct roles: development team, Scrum Master, and product owner. Each role has specific goals and has to comply to some of the major ambivalence that needs to be addressed inside of the Scrum framework. So, for instance, as a Scrum Master, you shouldn't be also a member of the development team, neither the product owner. Each specific role should be focused on their goal. Regarding the events available for the Scrum framework, they are all time box events. They are all specifically created to promote inspection and the adaptation that is required within the framework. So the sprint is at the core of the Scrum framework, and all the other events occur directly related to when a sprint begins or when a sprint ends. So for instance, the sprint planning happens early at the beginning of a sprint, the daily scrum happens on a daily basis during the sprint review happens at the end, and the sprint retrospective happens immediately after the sprint review and right before the next sprint starts. Regarding the artifacts available at this framework, the product backlog is where all the requirements are described, and it works as the most transparent item available inside the framework. The items that leave the product backlog go directly into the sprint backlog, where they are divided into tasks that allow the development team to actually produce the product increment that should be provided to the entire Scrum team and other stakeholders at a sprint review. The monitoring chart should be updated on a daily basis. So, usually at the daily Scrum, the monitoring charts are updated and allow for everyone that has access to the chart to actually know the pace of the development team and how the sprint backlog items are being tackled into the product increment that is being produced. The definition of done is extremely important because everyone inside of the team should be aware of what can and should be considered done when an item achieves the product increment. So this definition of done is fundamental for everyone inside of the team to actually know when to stop the work that needs to be addressed. And this wraps up for our Scrum Framework module. So thank you for watching.